Good day everyone, it's Alkali Shepherd. Today I'll be creating a simple Excel data entry template. You should know that the primary goal of this video is to show us how to avoid error as much as possible while collecting data using Microsoft Excel, which means that we'll be putting some certain measures in place. Alright then, so data collection and information documentation is very important, and it's the normal routine for every organization and even individuals to an extent. So in essence, I am saying every organization must collect and document information. So now how data stroke information is collected always has a direct effect on analysis, and in turn even on the decision making process that these organizations make and even the individuals. One thing I know for sure is good data entry templates will always ensure that the right and correct information is collected. But sadly, with enormous availability of great tools in recent times like Microsoft Excel, data entry templates are still poorly designed, and that still baffles me. So hence you can now see the consequences of this poorly designed templates on the end result. So today I'll be making use of Microsoft Excel, which is widely used for data collection, and this software really has simple implementable features. So these are the features I'll be using to create the simple Excel data entry template we're making use of today. You need not worry about complex formulas. I'll be making it as simple as possible. If at all we'll be making use of formulas, then that is not going to constitute more than 1% of the entire template. So just sit back, relax, and see how I create the simple Excel data entry template. So it is always advisable we have beautifully designed templates like this one, but the beauty is only secondary. The primary goal of this video is to show us how to put in measures that restrict the collection of errors as much as possible. So this is a Kaduna State Primary Development Agency human resource database for health. So in summary, this database stores information on whether or not a particular healthcare worker possesses a skill or not. So you can see there are a variety of columns. We have the region column, duty station LGA column, health facility, first name, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll be showing us the possible errors that can be entered in each of these columns and how we can restrict the collection of these errors subsequently while designing templates for ourselves like this one. Okay, so for the first column here is the region. And in this particular state, there are three regions or three zones, which spans from zone 1 to zone 3. And for every zone, there are duty stations peculiar to that zone. So for zone 3, for example, there are duty stations peculiar to only zone 3. That means those duty stations can't be found in zone 2 and zone 1. And this applies to zone 2 and zone 1 respectively. For zone 2, there are peculiar duty stations to zone 2. Now in turn, for every duty station, there are health facilities that are peculiar to this duty stations. So Java, for example, which is what we can see in this first cell, there are health facilities peculiar to only Java. Those health facilities can't be found in any other duty station you can see here, such as Kaduna North, Jama'a, and so on and so forth. So quickly, I come back to my first column. Good. So in this first cell, you can see we have a zone III, which says zone 3. This is written in Roman numeral. Somewhere around here, you can see we have a zone 3, but this one is written in words. That is the 3. You can see we have a zone 3 here also, but you can see the 3 this time around is written as a number. Now, these are inconsistencies in the insertion of these data. Although they are the same thing, but you can see that they are written differently, that is in different formats. Now, during analysis, you tend to see that all these values will be taken as independent values. That is completely different values is what Excel will assume these informations are. So let me quickly just insert a pivot table for analysis so you can see what I'm talking about. So I can buttress my point. So if I come to pivot table, for example, and I say from table stroke range, let's say a new worksheet. Good. Now if I quickly drag region to rows, you can see that somewhere around here we have zone 3, which is the 3 written in number. You can see we have zone 1. You can see this one. You can see we have zone 3 here, and the 3 is written in words. I can see somewhere around here we have zone 3, but this time around the 3 is written in Roman numerals. So this is clearly saying that whatever analysis you are going to carry out, this value should be taken as completely different zones instead of it being the same thing. So it is always advisable you have a particular format in mind in which you want this information to be entered as. Then you validate the particular column based on the format you have in mind. Let me quickly show you what I'm talking about. So let me come to my solutions sheet. This is where I'll be producing the solutions or profiling the solutions. So what I do is most times I create another sheet which I call the rough. Then I list out those values and the format I want them to be. So for my region column, these are the three possible values that can be entered in that column, which is zone II, and zone III. So there are only three zones I can predict, which means I know the possible values that can be entered in that region. Now select a format for yourself. So I decided to use the Roman numeral format, but that doesn't mean you are restricted to using this kind of format. You can decide to use the Word format, which means writing this things in Word completely. Or you can decide to use the numerical format, which means writing these values as numbers, right? But I'm deciding to use the Roman numeral format as a choice because I'm trying to reduce the inconsistencies in spelling as much as possible. So I quickly come back to my solutions, then I highlight the entire column. Now I'll be using a feature in Excel which is called the data validation feature. So this feature is basically going to take in all these values and reject anyone that is outside them. Let's quickly come to data here. You can see I have a data tab in my ribbon. So come to data, then look for data validation. So you can see I have mine somewhere around the right. This is Microsoft 365. It's possible you might be using another version of Excel, but just know that you can always find your data validation feature in the data tab. So come to data validation, select that, then hit on the data validation, then click on this drop down you can see here, then select list. Good. Now there are two ways you can validate. Is either you list out those options here. Good. So you can see these are the three values I want to be taken in this particular column. So I hit on OK. So when you do this, come to your first cell. When I come to my first cell, you can see there's a drop down list. There's a drop down button at the right like that. So when you click on it, you can see it's giving you the possible options that can be taken in this particular cell. So let's say I enter zone 1, something like this, and I hit on enter. You can see it's giving me a kind of error alert saying this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So if I hit on cancel, it goes because I have successfully validated this column to only take these three options, and anything outside this should be rejected. So if I hit on zone 2, you can see it takes in this value because the column can now recognize this value as what it has been validated as. If I try to put in zone 1, something like this, and I hit on enter, you can see I have another error value. So this is one measure you can put in place to reduce the collection of errors as much as possible. So you can see this has reduced the problem of inconsistencies and spelling. All right then. So another way you can do this is, so just highlight the entire column, and this is the one I recommend most times. So highlight the entire column once more, then come back to data validation, hit on data validation. So clear out this value she listed out here. So it's always best you reference from a different sheet. So that's where we now make use of this list I created here. So just select the array whereby you listed these values, but always try to extend it like this because there's a possibility of you wanting to introduce a zone 4 subsequently, who knows. So just always try to extend like this, probably 4 cells or so that subsequently when you have another zone to be added, all you just need to do is come here and insert the fourth zone and it reflects in your list. So let's just do that quickly and see what I'm talking about. So if I hit on OK and I come back to my solutions sheet. Let me go to the very first cell. Good. So if I come here, you can see my validation still remains. But let's say I have a zone 4, which has been added. How do I do that? All you just need to do is come to your rough, then insert a zone 4. You've already taken care of the array. So it's going to include this value you're inserting eventually. So when I come back to my solutions here, then I hit the drop down, you can see my zone 4 has been added. So this is why I recommend to always create a different sheet and list it out there. Then you can reference while validating because there's a possibility of you wanting to add another value subsequently. All right, then. So that is that for the region column. It will basically reject anything outside this values that you validated the column after. So let's say after you've validated this column, you might want to influence the error alert that comes out subsequently, probably to tell the person the value he has entered is wrong. And you might also want to guide the person as to what to do. So how do you achieve that? So we highlight the column quickly. So come back to data validation, then hit on data validation like that. So at the top here, you can see a tab which says error alert. So when you hit on this area is where you type out what you want to come out. I guess before now you could see saying something like the value doesn't match the data restriction value for that column. Yeah, but you can always influence what you want to come out. So let's say you can see. So I'm clearly telling the person that this value can't be taken and he should use the drop down found in the cell. So I've told the person whatever is entering is wrong, and I am also guiding the person as to what to do. So this is what the error alert helps you to do. So let me quickly come back to the first cell here and try to enter a wrong value so everybody can see. So let's say I come here and I enter zone 4, something like this. So when I click on enter, you can see which is saying this value can't be taken, hit cancel and use the drop down. So this is actually helpful. I'm not just telling the person that his value can't be collected, but I'm also guiding the person as to what to do. So that is just what I wanted showing. So now for the second column, which is the duty station stroke LGA, so I come back to the possible errors so we can see the kind of errors that can come out here. So for this first cell, you can see we have Java. Now, if you scroll down a little, somewhere around here, it was written as Jabi. So you can see this is wrong spellings. Definitely analysis, definitely while running analysis, this will be taken as a completely different duty station entirely, which is not supposed to be. So you can see wrong spelling is another problem we can come across. And also inconsistencies. You can see the second cell says Kaduna North, and somewhere around here it was written as KD North. Although they are the same thing, but you can see the inconsistency in how they are being spelled. Here it was written as Kaduna in full, and here it was written as KD. While running analysis, you see that these values will be taken as completely different values entirely. So how do we minimize this error as much as possible? This is where validation comes to play. That is the data validation. Now another thing I want you to put into consideration is before I started everything, I made mention of certain duty stations being peculiar to certain zones. So there is something I'll be introducing. I want it to be in such a way that whenever I pick a zone in this cell, for example, zone 3, I want the duty stations that will be available in my drop down list to be duty stations that are peculiar to zone 3 alone, because I can't select zone 3 and now find duty stations that cut across every zone in this particular database. I don't know if you get what I mean. When I select zone 2, for example, I also expect to see duty stations that are peculiar to zone 2 and the drop down that I'll be creating after validating this column. So how do I achieve that? Just observe and see what I'm going to do. So I come back to my rough sheet. Good. So first of all, I list out all the possible local government areas or duty stations I can find in zone 1. I do the same thing for zone 2, and I also do the same thing for zone 3. And make sure you have a particular format for every duty station. So you can see for Sabongari, I am choosing this format to be how Sabongari should be entered. I don't want any deviation from this. And you can see for Kaduna North, I chose the KD North format. I don't want anybody writing it in full. So make sure that you've selected a specific format you want those informations to be entered and list them out here. Because subsequently, anybody trying to enter, let's say Kaduna North, for example, that column will reject because this is the format I designated to Kaduna North. So definitely you see what I mean by the time I am done. So what I'll be doing is now I'll be naming all these values. So you can see these are the values that are specific to zone 1. So I'll be naming these values. I'll be naming this group of values after the zones they belong to. So you can see in this column we have zone underscore I, zone underscore II, zone underscore III. So you name these values exactly as you can see the named here. You name these values exactly after the values you can see here, including the underscore. See what I mean? So when I highlight like this and I come here, make sure you come to a formula bar. There is this name box at the extreme left. So this is where you give it the name. So you name this group of values zone I. Now you might wonder why I'm being specific about the underscore. That is because when naming values like this, when naming group of values using Excel, Excel rejects spaces. Let's say, for example, there was no underscore there, then I hit on enter. You can see this is saying you must enter a valid reference you want to go to or type a valid name for the selection. So that was the main reason why, while listing out these values, I introduced an underscore, because subsequently I knew I'll be having to name this group of values after this values here, and Excel rejects naming values like this with a space in between whatever name you are giving to them. So this is how this should be named, with an underscore. Good. When I hit on enter, you can see Excel accepts. Now, the what you should know is, if at all you name this, if at all this is zone I, right? And you name this zone 1, for example, you come here and instead of zone I, you type out zone 1 like this. What we'll be doing subsequently will be drastically affected, because what we're trying to achieve is whatever you've selected here influences whatever comes out here. Just see what I'm doing. So for this one, I'll name it after zone 2. Exactly the name you see here is what you give to this group of values. So you come here and you type out zone underscore II, because the value here, or this value being selected, is what will reflect or bring up this values. So when I click on enter, you can see that has been accepted. The same thing applies to zone 3. So you just quickly give this zone III, then hit on enter. Now when you click this drop down, you can see the latest names I just gave to those group of values. So if I hit on zone 1, for example, you can see it brings me here telling me that this group of values have been named as zone 1. If I select zone 2, for example, you can see these are the values highlighted. So if I select zone 3, for example, you can see it shows me the group of values that have been named after zone 3. So after doing this, come back to your solutions, then highlight the duty station LGA column. So highlight the entire column, then come back to data validation. So I hit on this, then I come back to the settings tab. Good. So hit the drop down, then come to list, then come to your source. So we'll be entering a formula here. So the name of the formula is called the indirect. So this is how it goes: equal to, then indirect. Now what we're saying is, now say indirect of this cell. Now this is what is happening. I am saying, if you remember, we named those group of values after the values that can be found in the region column. So now we're saying the indirect of whatever value that can be found in any of the cells. So if I pick zone 2, I am saying what should reflect here are the indirect values of zone 2. That is, those group of LGAs I named after zone 2. I think this should be clear enough. So I just quickly take out one of the dollar signs, because I want the column to be fixed, but the row should keep changing. So this is good enough. Then okay. Now see something. So if I select zone 1, for example, and I come here and I click the drop down, you can see only local government areas specific to zone 1 are listed. You can't find the local government specific to zone 2 and zone 3 here. So observe, the last duty station for zone 1 is Ikara. If I come to my rough, you can see that is the last duty station for zone 1. If I come back to my solutions sheet, and let's say I select zone 2 now, if I select the drop down for the duty station LGA, you can see only local government areas specific to zone 2 are listed out here. So let's say the last duty station here is Berinangwari. If I come back to rough, can see the last duty station under zone 2 is Birningwari. So that is the aim of the indirect function. So all the procedures we took is for this to work properly. So just follow the step-by-step process I took, and you should be able to produce this also. So I can just come here and I select bar. So let's say for zone 2, I'm entering something like EXC, and I click enter. You can see this is rejecting it, saying this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. And by now you should be able to know that you can influence this error alert you can see popping out here. So for example, let's say, okay, this is sober and this belongs to zone 1. So let's try to enter this value for zone 2 and see what comes out. So if I click on this, and hit enter, you can see it's rejecting it because it can't find sober in the list of duty stations that are peculiar to zone 2. And this is how we minimize error as much as possible in the duty station LGA. So now let us move to the health facility column and now see the possible errors that can be collected in this particular column.